You're listening to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast, a place for sex addicts to share their experiences of recovery, to help break the stigma, myths, and misconceptions of sex addiction. This podcast may contain topics of sexuality, sexual trauma, dysfunction, or other things that may be triggering, so listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. My name is Jason, I'm a sex addict, and I will be your podcast host for today. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to episode number 51 of the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast. In this episode, I'm happy to welcome back my friend Rye to the podcast, this time as a conversation. Previously, Rye shared his first step on episode number 26 that we recorded at a Zoom meeting. A few months ago on a phone call, he asked if he could come back on the podcast to record an episode with me where we could have a more in-depth conversation. And I'm so grateful that we actually had this opportunity. And as you'll hear in Rye's share, he has recently been struggling with slips in his recovery. We thought that talking about our struggles and slips will help others in recovery having the same problems. In line with that, I wanted to share another reading from the Daily Reader Answers in the Heart by Hazelden, and this comes from October 18th. Skipping the quote at the beginning, jumping down here, most of us have slips in our recovery. It's true that the stronger our abstinence is, the further we get from the possibility of slipping. But being human, as well as powerless over our sex addiction, makes slips a reality we all have to face. We can be honest if we slip, both with ourselves and with others in the program. They, along with our higher power, will understand how we feel. We need never bear alone the remorse, alienation, and shame we feel after acting out. We can also resist the impulse to anesthetize ourselves with alcohol or something else to avoid the pain of a slip. Through the program, we've learned how to make amends, especially to ourselves. We can put this knowledge to work again if we slip. While a slip is painful, it is not a reason to fall back to where we started. Instead, we can recommit ourselves to sanity and manageability, letting go of the past, and being abstinent today. My abstinence exists from this moment on. I can handle the present and find my sanity here and now. When I found this reading, it matched perfectly with the text that I've been having with Rye over the past few weeks, as well as in our conversation for this episode. Before getting to our recording, I wanted to mention a few things up front that might be triggering for some. If you've heard episode number 26, when Rye shared his first step, his struggle is mainly around child pornography. And this can be quite a difficult subject to talk about, even in the rooms of SAA. Recently, some new SAA meetings have started around MAPs, or minor attracted persons, for people who are struggling with those issues or having legal consequences. Looking at definitions, minor attracted person is an umbrella term for people with any condition that means they are sexually attracted to minors or those below the age of consent, including pedophilia, which is the attraction to prepubescent children, hebephilia, which is the attraction to pubescent children and early adolescents, and ephebophilia, which is the attraction to late adolescents. Another thing I found just by Googling what is a minor attracted individual, individuals with attractions to minors are generally considered equivalent to individuals who commit sexual offenses against children. In reality, minor attracted person, MAPS, and minor targeting sex offenders are two separate groups. And this is the case for Rye. He is a minor attracted person and not a minor targeting sex offender. For myself, I identify as a minor attracted person. In the description that I mentioned previously would be the latter two, which would include the attraction to pubescent to late adolescent. And I also had a few things to share about purely obsessional OCD, or pure O. Rye mentioned that his psychiatrist talked about treating his problem as OCD, And I found some information by Googling Pure O and intrusive thoughts. Pure O is a type of OCD which a sufferer engages in hidden compulsions such as intrusive thoughts instead of visible rituals. These intrusive thoughts can include thoughts about causing self-harm or harm to others and persistent fears about engaging in repugnant sexual acts like molesting a child. And I wanted to make sure that, I'm not diagnosing Rye, but it sounded like this is what his psychiatrist was talking about. And at that point in the conversation, I wanted to talk a little bit more about that, but we got sidetracked. And just like the way I share music on the podcast, I did want to share a podcast episode from a podcast that I listened to. And again, this is me as Jason. This does not reflect the opinions of SAA or the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO or anything. But years ago, I started listening to a podcast called The Mental Illness Happy Hour with Paul Gilmartin. And he was the former host of Dinner and a Movie on TV. And he's done a number of great episodes on various addictions and mental illnesses. He's got a really dark sense of humor. And some of the listener surveys and things can get pretty darn dark in terms of sexual abuse and things like that. So with all that being said, there is an episode number 350 where he has a licensed marriage and family therapist named Kimberly Quinlan, who talks about intrusive thoughts and pure OCD. And that episode was from 2017. And so I had that kind of in the back of my mind, and I wanted to bring it up during our conversation, but I didn't get the chance to. So if any of you are interested in listening to that, please check it out. And again, that is coming from me as Jason and not the SAA community. So although our conversation got dark in a few places, I felt that it was a very inspirational talk. And we ended our conversation talking about music and wrestling and things like that. So there is some joy and fun in this conversation. And with all of that finally out of the way, I'm now ready to turn it over to that conversation. Here it is. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, well, I want to start off by saying for anyone that wants to do Zoom, don't get a Chromebook. Chromebook is garbage. I bought a Chromebook and my mic doesn't work. I even bought one of those professional type mics, still bad quality. Like I get better quality on my iPhone than I do on that Chromebook. So I'm like, that was just garbage. So that's rather irritating. I hate that I have to use one hand to talk to you. And so what do you want to start talking out by?
Yeah, usually, I know that you were on episode 26 doing your first step at the noon meeting, but usually I start off with asking about what's in your various circles, inner, middle, and outer. And then from there, we can just go over wherever we need to go.
Right. Well, it's interesting because like one of your guests did the outer circle first.
Yeah.
And that was cool because I wanted to do that, right? Because I was thinking, like, if I ever get on this podcast again, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start in the outer circle.
Okay.
So my character defect is I want to be the best at everything. And I want to outperform everyone. It's a character defect. So I'm like, damn it, someone beat me to the punch already. So I had to relook at my circles and I had to start them. And I believe in the circles, like it's more of like a pyramid, right? Like I believe in a 1-2-3 ratio. Like I have 10 inner circle, 20 middle circle, and 30 outer circle list.
Nice.
That was what I challenged myself to do that. So middle circle, which I think sometimes gets kind of lost between, the really bad and the really good. And I think the middle circle sometimes gets overlooked because I think those are warning bells. It's not so much of a safety net as it is a warning bell. Like for me, like if I'm doing middle circle stuff, like I'm about ready to relapse. It's not a hammock, right? That's what my first ever sponsor ever told me. It's a safety net, not a hammock.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'll read my middle circle stuff because I'm an addict and I want to be different.
Okay. Go for it.
So first and foremost, this might be different than a lot of people. I have adult pornography in my middle circle behavior. And when we talk about my inner circle stuff, and that will be more clear, I have any and all social media compulsively. And I have any media sharing sites. One of the things I have on there is complacency and contentment, because I've done that throughout the various years, and it's always that's always spells danger. And arrogance and excessive pride is another one. HALT, which is the acronym for hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. I also put looking up non-pornographic images of adults on there and masturbating to them. That's a middle circle. Any mental lust. We talk about that. You guys, particularly in your Bay Area meetings, talk about mental lust. And I thought that was perfect for mental lust of children is in my middle circle. Because if I see a child in which, I guess that's kind of the spoiler, right? Like, so I have a sexual attraction to children, which I'll get to in my inner circle stuff. But if I look at a child and I think more than the 3-second rule, 2-second, I'm like, then that's, danger zone for me. Not taking my meds, negative self-talk, self-harm, which I've done, not working the program, isolating. And here's another one, and we'll get to this too, is physical touch of my daughter, whether it's playful or nurturing, is middle circle behavior for me because of my issues. And I think lying, half-truths, and deception is definitely middle circle. And I think trying to be all things to all people, I think really kind of sums it up. Like preparing for this podcast, I pulled a college thing, and I stayed up all night. Well, the problem with that was I stayed up all night. I didn't take my meds because my meds make me sleepy. And so I was sleepy and I was tired. I was tired and I was hungry. And that was because I wanted to be the best. Like I couldn't just settle to being just another guest. Like in my pride, I wanted to be the best. And that really kind of led to me relapsing today. And my inner circle behaviors was because I thought I want to be the best and I want to have all this stuff documented and everything else. So again, arrogance and excessive pride, which, middle circle behaviors that led to my inner circle. And so my inner
I remember getting your text today, and now I can see how that definitely correlates.
Right. Feel free to cut me off anytime, like if you want to interject. My inner circle stuff, I have 10 things. Now, before I read them off, not all these behaviors I've done, but I also know I'm an addict and I always look for loopholes, right? So there's behaviors that I've never done in here.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure I'm covering my bases. So I'm like, well, technically that's not in my inner circle, so I'm okay. Right. For my first two are the two big ones. The first two I have written down, I said, looking at and searching for any child pornography of any kind, and looking at and searching for any nude media of children of any kind. Now, what's the difference? Well, again, technicalities, right? Like you can always say like a nude image of a child can be artful if it's not sexually suggestive. But to me, it's no different. I use it for the same thing. Like it doesn't matter to me whether I'm looking at a picture of a dressed child and sexually fantasizing them is the same as if I would be watching a child pornography video. The brain doesn't know the difference. It's the same. And so I have to put that in my inner circle, that the fantasies along with the actual illegal stuff has to be in the inner circle. There can't be any gray area. I also put using, and I mentioned this in my first step, like searching and masturbating to social media and internet non-nude images of children. And I can get on a whole rant about how parents, I think, sexualize their girls on social media at a very young age. And as an addict, when I'm acting out, I don't have a problem with it. But when I'm not acting out and my mind is sober, and like, it's always kind of like, don't they know that they're putting their children out there for people, and that's, it's very hard to talk, right? Because, I've known, and in my first step I mentioned, like, I've known for a long time that I've had this sexual attraction to children. And I've always been very hard on myself for that attraction. And it's hard to talk about. And like, I call it the meth of sex addiction, right? Like it's like adult pornography use is socially acceptable. But if I told someone that I'm sexually attracted to children, that rubs people that are not programmed the wrong way.
Yeah.
And the consequences for me for those type of inner circle behaviors are greater than for somebody else, with other that just have, not that I'm discounting the suffering that people who watch adult porn compulsive, and I'm not downplaying that at all. I don't want that to come off as that, but the worst that can happen is a lost marriage, not 20 years in prison.
Yeah, I was going to say the legal consequences are vastly different.
And so kind of going down here, any and all sexual and inappropriate fantasies of children's in the inner circle, going to strip clubs and massage parlors, which I've never done, is also in the middle circle, paying for any and all sex acts, which I've only done once in my life. That's another story. Child molestation and inappropriate behavior with children, that goes without saying. Any abuse of any adult, like physical, sexual, mental, and rape of any kind, whether it's, and I say any kind because that's either by force, which is what people, I think, when they say rape, think of that. I also put by manipulation, guilting, and pressuring, because those are also forms of rape. If I have to guilt someone to have sex with me, I'm raping them. That there is no gray line between there. If I'm coercing and using situations to my advantage to get into someone's pants, that's rape.
Yeah, enthusiastic consent is what's needed, and not just being forced into a situation. Yeah.
All right. So I kind of rambled on there. What questions do you kind of got for me? As far.
Well, so far we've done middle and inner circle. How about outer circle?
Okay. Well, again, I have 30 listed down, and because I challenge myself to do 30, but I can kind of sum it up: going to meetings, hosting meetings, which I'm hosting a meeting right after this, going to therapy, going to the gym, doing yoga, doing martial arts, spending time with my daughter, spending time with my mom, reading books. I used to love reading all the time, and I've kind of gotten away from that. And I love, someone brought this up, doing laundry as part of being in the outer circle. If you got nothing else to put in the outer circle, you put your laundry in there. I have that on there. I also have good hygiene, because that's the first thing that goes when I'm depressed and acting out is my hygiene.
Yeah.
Making outreach calls, which incidentally, I did make an outreach call before I acted out today. I take that as a kind of like, I at least made the attempt to call someone and say, hey, I want to act out. And that's the kind of the first step, right? Then the next step is to keep calling people, right? And not act out afterwards. I have studying Buddhist doctrine. Like I want to study Buddhism because I feel like that's where I want to get my spirituality from. I have that in there. And taking my meds as prescribed, and that's the big thing, is because when I get frustrated, because a lot of times for years, my meds affect my libido. And so times where I've gotten frustrated that I couldn't climax when masturbating, I would go off my meds. But problem is, when I go off my meds, the compulsiveness of wanting, that urge, that never-ending hunger that this addiction has, takes control. And when I'm not on my meds at all, I can't just masturbate twice a day. It goes to like 5, 6, 7 times a day. What's that phrase? Like chasing the dragon. I think it's kind of like this.
Yeah.
Like I'm chasing this high that I can never get to. And the more I try to get to it, the farther and farther away it goes. And that cycle of the farther and farther away it goes, the more and more I'm doing it. But I keep going further and further away. It's just never ending. And so being on my meds is something I have to do. And sometimes I do it in spite of the fact, like, I refer to it as poisoning the demon. Taking my meds poisons the demon. I have to take those. And so that's kind of my circles in a nutshell. I kind of went all over the place. I kind of envisioned it being smoother than that, but
it was fine. Hearing about taking your meds, I know that some either outreach calls or texts that I've noticed your mood has been different at various points, and now I know that there's a question that I can ask: are you taking your meds? So
right.
That was something that I don't think I was aware of before. So just seeing the correlation of not taking your meds and how it affects your mood, as I remember, backtracking, looking at when we recorded your first step and just the connection that you had with the group at that point, and where your trajectory was going in working the steps and being an active participant in the group. Just shortly thereafter, you kind of disappeared for a while, and we were wondering, what's going on with Thrive? What's going on with Thrive?
Well, I'll tell you exactly what happened. And this is kind of like sometimes how things happen, because we did this on August 10th. And I remember that day because 3 days later was the 1-year anniversary of my daughter's mom passing away.
Yeah.
And it was hard. And to be honest, I was in a decline before that. Like, I put up a really great facade of, I had 90 days. I was doing all this. I was doing this for the podcast. But I was looking back, and I've been keeping a journal since 2017. So I went back through my journal entries, and I took a lot of notes. My absolute peak of sobriety and recovery was right around the end of July. I had done steps 7 and 8. I was ready to take step 9. I decided I was going to go back to college. I was active in martial arts. I had all that stuff going for me. And then, because at the beginning, remember when I said being all things to all people and overloading my plate, I was trying to be everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't doing the stuff to keep me healthy. And I kept getting closer and closer to acting out, but not sharing about it, which I think was really ultimately why I ended up losing it, was because I wasn't being honest with how close I was to relapsing at that point. And the biggest thing is, it was so depressing that it's so hard to do the right thing. Like, I beat myself up over all the time. It's like, why can't you just not stop sexually fantasizing about children? Why is it so fucking hard? And I beat myself up over it.
Mm-hmm.
And the backtrack, when my daughter's mom passed away, I was angry because she was 6 months pregnant. She was engaged to be married, and she was searching for her first home. And she died. And me, the fucking pedophile that I thought that I was, like, why couldn't it have been me? And I was, for a long time, I'm like, I wish I was dead. I wish that I could trade places because I'm the piece of shit. That was hard. And I somehow blocked that year. Like, when I did the first step, it didn't even occur to me. And then it hit home. And I loved her so much. And she hated me. And rightfully so. I was horrible. But I got the best part of her in my daughter. So 7 months ago, we did this first step.
Mm-hmm.
And I went on a big, big decline. After that, I had 112 days of sobriety, and I didn't stay in school long. I had to drop out of school. I had destroyed 2 laptops because of the stuff that I was downloading. And I stopped going to therapy. I was suicidal. I lost all hope that I was going to be able to change. And the thing is, too, I was starting to cross more and more lines I said I would never cross.
Mm-hmm.
Acting out on my daughter's tablet. Looking at nude images of children on my daughter's tablet. More than once.
Yeah, I know that feeling. The addictive mind. I remember when my wife had an old smartphone that she wasn't using, and she let my son use it. And this is when he was little, for playing video games and stuff. And the addict mind in me, I found it and realized that it was still internet connected. And, I've got pretty safe stuff on my computer to keep me in a safe place. But once I realized that there was another device that, I could use, I thought about it, and the mental cravings over the next couple of days, once I realized, I can get to the internet with this, all rationale just went right out the window. It was my wife's device, but my son was using it. And yet, I got my fix, the thing that I needed, by acting out with it. And so, I know that feeling.
And the biggest thing around this time period, so around October, things were shit. I had lost my job at this hardware store that I'd been at to over a year. That was in September. And I lost that job because I kept having anxiety attacks at work. And my psychiatrist at the time, a different psychiatrist than the one that turned me into DHS, wouldn't excuse any of my absences and wouldn't let me take a leave of absence, even though I was losing my fucking mind every day at work. And because I couldn't get those absences excused, I had to resign, or else I was going to get fired. I think the darkest point was around November, around that same time I was using my daughter's tablet to act out. I was starting to cross more and more of her boundaries, and I was getting really scared. And in December, I made a very difficult choice to let her go and to have her move in with her mother's parents, because I didn't want to molest her. and I didn't feel she was safe around me anymore. And that sucked so much. And I went down quite a bit of dark paths of wanting to die all the time. I kept having visions of blowing my brains out multiple times a day. And I just want to fucking die. I don't want to become a monster, and I much rather die people knowing the best parts of me and not living long enough to see the worst parts of me. And one of the things I haven't mentioned is I have 2 close friends in the program who are going to spend a lot of time in prison for child pornography charges. And I kept on saying, don't you fucking get it? Don't you see what you have to lose? And I tell myself, you're still doing the same stuff. It was very hard. And you know, we've kind of talked a lot about dark stuff, but I've had like 3 or 4 different jobs in the last 3 or 4 months because of the mental illness and because of the on again, off again acting out. But I'm starting to feel a little bit more hope now. I'm not in the dark path. I found a psychiatrist that believes in me, and not just believes in, she believes this is all OCD related. She believes that my sexual attraction to children is OCD related. And I told her when I first went to college, I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And after a year and a half of that, I'm like, I can't do that. I can't put these future students at risk. Mm-hmm. And so I dropped out. She told me, the only person that's ever told me that if I take my meds and do the therapy stuff that we're going to do, there is no reason why I can't work with kids. And that was the biggest bright spot. No one's ever said that to me. And no one's ever said that I could ever work with kids. People that know everything, right? Like, it was just like this doom to like, I have to always be on my guard. I always have to avoid certain places, even though I can legally go to them because I've never been convicted of anything. But for someone to believe in me and say that I can get you to a point where you can work with children and be safe around them, it's a big confidence booster. And one of the things I started doing a couple weeks ago was I'm like, I'm just going to pledge sobriety every day and see how it goes. And, you know, and today was hard because I relapsed. And I'm like, I'm still going to put 0 days of recovery, 0 days sober, pledging to stay, and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And I told you I made a program call. I called LJ because he was Florida time. So I'm like, it was 6:30 in the morning. I'm like, well, I'm not calling Jason. It's 4:30 in California. You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, well, LJ's an hour ahead, so I'll call him. And we had a nice chat. And even though I did act out, I still made the right decision to call him. And I think I'm more or less acted out because I didn't take my meds and I pulled an all-nighter. Classic of what I've done my whole life. I worked overnights most of my life. When I was in college, I did all my work overnights. And it's that reward system, right? Like, I worked hard to write all these notes and listen to the podcast and like doing all this. Like, I deserve a reward. What's my treat going to be? And I had to fix that, right? Because for years, decades, it's been sexual fantasies. It's been my reward. It's not just been my coping skills, my coping mechanism. It's also been my reward system too. And that is the key, is switching that. And I have hope that I can do that. I really do.
Yeah, I was going to mention what you had shared in the text today. So yeah, you've been, texting me for the past, week and a half, at least, on, what day you're on and pledging to stay sober that day. And it really is, a one day at a time program. The next 24 hours or next hour, if you need to look at it in that way. And so, yeah, we've had this back and forth going, but yeah, I really loved what you wrote today. Despite the relapse, I've never felt more hopeful about the future. Bigger pictures that I'm heading in the right direction. Sometimes a step back is necessary to appreciate the path ahead. And then the bit about, in wrestling in high school, we had a saying, in wrestling, there are winners and there are learners. There are no losers. I didn't lose today. I learned a lesson on how to prevent future relapses. I'm stronger because of this setback If recovery were easy, the rooms of SAA would be empty. And that is completely the truth. So, yeah, I really appreciate you texting that today.
Yeah. And I'll let you in on a little secret, right? So, like, I write one text message and I copy it and paste it to about 15 to 20 people.
Mm-hmm.
And then my phone blows up, which is cool. I'm not doing it for the phone to blow up, but I'm doing it to hold myself accountable. And if I can get one or two replies saying, hey, keep it going, whatever, that's fuel for me. It's like, hey, someone believes in me that I can do this. And because of that, I've had other people doing the exact same thing with me. Like they're telling me what day of sobriety they're on and pledging that they're going to stay sober because I started doing it. Now it's like, I can do this. I can do this. And the thing is, too, tonight is hard because I haven't had any sleep. And right after I do this podcast, I have to host an SAA meeting. And it's going to be really, really tempting. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you. It's going to be really tempting to act out afterwards because I'm tired and whatever. But I pledged today that I was going to stay sober. And I plan on it. I have no plans to relapse tonight after binging earlier in the day. I'm going to finish the night strong, and I'm determined that's going to happen. And I have to think that way. Because if I keep thinking that I'm going to fail, then that's going to happen. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like if I keep saying I'm never going to be able to do this, like I'm never going to be able to maintain sobriety, well, then it's not going to happen. Right now, I'm working 2 jobs, working about 60 hours a week. And there's a benefit and a drawback to that. One is 60 hours a week takes 60 hours away a week that I have time to act out. That's just the reality of it, right? And acting out at work's never been a thing of mine. And I know there are people that struggle with it, so I'm not downplaying it. I'm not downplaying it at all. But masturbating in the work bathrooms and work stalls has never been a problem of mine. If I'm at work, I'm at work. You know, when I was younger, I did a lot of wearing when I was working at a gas station of children and adults. But I haven't done that in over 10 years. But for the most part, when I'm at work, I'm sober. So that's 60 hours I take away from acting out. Problem with that is it makes for a very, very long week. And so I don't have time to cook. I don't have time to clean. I'm just so exhausted. So I actually had to pay someone to come clean my apartment once a week because I got a warning from my apartment building that my apartment is trash, which it was. And so I have someone coming in to clean. And it's like, I've spent so much money eating out this past month. And I'm like, I'm negating all this extra money that I'm by ordering, DoorDash or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's hard, man. But not to have anything to complain because I much rather the cost of living is so much lower here in Iowa than it is in California. So
yeah, tell me about it.
Hey, you're more than welcome to move to the Midwest with me. More than welcome to that. That offer still stands.
You could probably afford a house there.
And that's no shit.
Here, no fucking way.
Yeah, like for $1 million, you can probably buy any house in Sioux City, Iowa, the city of 100,000 people. If this gets out, it gets out. A part of me wants it to, and maybe that's a self-sabotage thing, but it's like the people who I've came out to about my sexual attraction to children, more times than not, my friends have stuck by me. And because they've gotten to know me first, right, as a person. And I think that's the key, right? And I think that's what sex addicts in general, like getting to know the person before the addiction is important. And I think because people have got to know me and know that I'm a good person and I'm open with what I struggle with. But, for a lot of people, they've never heard anyone who's had those type of problems with having attraction to children talk about it because it's such a taboo topic to talk about.
Yeah.
And it's like people are scared to even reach out for help because they're afraid that they're going to get turned into the police for reaching out for help. I think it's such more of a problem than what we think it is. And I hope that by putting my stories out there and by doing this podcast, that I can reach out to someone. If I can help just one person, just one, then it was worth it. And put myself out there was worth it.
Yeah. I know for me, when I did my first step and started talking about my issues with child pornography, the various things in my life that kind of led me, the little stepping stones that led me on that path, it was really difficult to talk about it at meetings. The more and more I became a speaker at different meetings and would share about it, it became easier and easier to talk about. And when it came time to recording the podcast, the reason I didn't use my actual first step is there were a lot of specifics that could tie. It was mostly around my voyeurism, that could tie to people that knew me and might know these other people. But talking about my bottom being in the program being is when my wife discovered the child pornography on the computer. Putting that out there on the podcast was so scary. And that was episode 3. And I wanted to put that out there early on to give people the courage to share what they need to. And if there are any legal consequences, I can always remove the episode or take things down. But one of my friends, he and I were both on another recovery podcast. He was a multiple winner in different programs. And I think in his podcast episode, he talked about the alcoholism and the sex addiction. He was arrested. And when his case was coming up, the podcaster pulled his episode from the public. And so, yeah, if anything like that comes up, I will always err on the side of caution and either edit stuff out or pull episodes that need to be pulled for legal consequences. But yeah, talking about this stuff out in the public is difficult. And the impetus of the podcast was to help break the stigma of addiction. And, we definitely have difficulties talking about this kind of stuff. Just the other day, we have a couple of meetings that have popped up. I don't know if the abbreviation is spelled out or just said MAP or minor attracted persons. And I feel that I should probably check out one or two. I definitely still have issues with that. Picking up my son from school around middle school and high schoolers, and that attraction is still there. I'm not doing any voyeuristic activities or things like that, but I can still feel that pull. And having a place like a MAP meeting in SAA would be a good place for people to share about that type of stuff. And I will post not direct links, but I will post information of how to find meetings like that.
And I've been to a couple of those MAP meetings, and it's funny. A couple of the people that are kind of like behind it, we all met at the Bay Area, the noon Zoom room. We all met there, and we bonded over it. And I'll say this to you, Jason. The first time we met at one of those meetings, I think we were helping. There was a Q&A thing. We were trying to help another addict, and we were going back and forth. But when I listened to your podcast, episode 3, and when you mentioned child pornography, I'm like, that's what I want to do. If this guy can talk about it on a podcast, then I can talk about it. And I felt like I have an obligation to talk about it because someone has to. Someone's got to be that first, and someone's got to risk something to help others. And you were the main reason why I wanted to share my first step. And I approached you with that idea. I'm like, it'd be really cool if we did a first step for the podcast. And I was happy to do it. And I regret that I didn't take care of myself afterwards, but I don't regret the podcast. I don't regret putting my story out there. And I've sent people, my friends to it. I'm like, here's my story. It's kind of intense, but if you want to know what I struggle with, listen to this podcast. And, like I said, I've kept more friends than I've lost over it. And that's always a good thing. But, you were really the inspiration for me to actually put my story out there for the public. And I want to thank you for that. And even though you may feel like you did a watered down version, you still put yourself out there. Yeah. And I want you to promise me something. I don't want you to ever take my episodes down. I don't care what legal consequences that I may face. I don't want you to take those down.
Okay.
And I do that because I don't want to try to I'm hiding anything. If I'm facing legal problems, I want to be honest about, it's like, yes, I feel like if hiding it already reinforces that stigma of doing anything to break or trying to get out of trouble. I don't care what happens to me. If my stories can help someone, I want them to stay up there, regardless of what happens. I've thought about it. It's like, Sioux City, Iowa is not a very big city. It's 100,000 people. It wouldn't be very hard to track my identity down. But to me, it's worth it because I'm helping others. I'm helping the bigger picture. I'm helping someone. I'm helping a global population that listens to this podcast. And it's all worth it to me. One of the things that really turned things, not turn things around, but was definitely something that's like, I have to get my shit together. Was when my daughter told me that she wanted to kill herself. At 9 years old.
Yeah. That was, when I heard you share about that, that was just so heartbreaking.
And I did everything I needed to do. I contacted the school. I got into therapy right away. I rose up to the occasion, but after that was over, I fell hard again. And I committed myself to a mental health stabilization center because I started blaming myself for all the problems, right? Because I'm the one that made her move into her grandparents that she didn't want to move in there. She wanted to stay with me, and she didn't understand why she had to leave. How do you explain that, right? And I try to explain it the best I can. And I told her, like, I can't take care of you right now. And you need stability, and you need people that can take care of you. And I can't do that right now. Because it was getting to the point where it's like I was just in my bedroom. If I wasn't acting out, I was depressed sleeping, only waking up to eat. And I just left her to her own devices because I hated myself so much. And I was in that vicious cycle. And I'm like, and I refuse to have my daughter be dragged down with me. If I'm going to go down, my daughter is not going to come down with me. And that was why I gave her up. This fact, just like, if I can't get this together and shit hits the fan, I want my daughter to be protected. I don't want her suffering because of me. But on the bright note, this, because we got dark there. On a bright note, I made a promise to her in December that I was going to work hard enough to get her back by her birthday. And in 2 weeks, she's going to move back in with me because I feel like I'm
great.
Yes. And I feel like I'm in a better place to do it. I think it's time. I don't feel like she's in danger with me, but I can't let my guard down either. And one of the things that I did to hold myself accountable, just yesterday, I had a family session with her therapist, and I told her therapist that I have sexual attractions to children. And I told her that to hold myself accountable. And I said, and I told her, it's like, whether you turn me into DHS, if you think you need to, that's on you. But I want you to know this because as a professional, you know what I struggle with, and you know what to look for. That's just another layer of safety I'm putting around my daughter. And that's the important thing to me. My recovery I have to do for myself, but I have to keep my daughter protected too. And that was really important to me. And, and I've had people in the program ask me, like, what are you doing to keep your daughter safe? And those are always questions that hurt the most. Like what you're doing hasn't been working. What are you going to do to keep her safe? And when I finally said, like, I'm going to tell our therapist that I'm sexually attracted to children, they said, oh, well, that's a good way to keep her safe. Right. And so it's one day at a time. And I think that sometimes it's hard for especially people beginning in the program. Recovery isn't coming easy. Steps are hard. Relapses are happening all the time. It just seems like there's no way out. But sometimes I think we focus too much on consecutive days of sobriety. And I think sometimes, especially in the beginning, it's important to look at the cumulative days. If you can get 7 days of sobriety and you relapse once, and then get another 7 days of sobriety, hey, in 2 weeks, you acted out only one time. That was better than acting out 2 or 3 times a day for 365 days a year.
Exactly.
And I think sometimes we focus too much on consecutive days of sobriety. And I think sometimes in the beginning, I know it helps for me to think it's like, I'm not where I once was. So I'm making steps, and it's interesting. Like I love the new Zoom room meetings. Don't get me wrong. I think the newcomer I just think it just puts unnecessary attention to someone that's, hey, admit that you're a newcomer, admit that you haven't gotten a month of sobriety in, like it's that constant reminder, especially if they go to the meeting every day. It's, yeah, I'm a newcomer. Yeah, I'm a newcomer. Yeah, I'm a newcomer. And I think sometimes it's a turnoff to me, and I don't do it. When I go to the meetings, I don't do it. I don't do it.
It's not a requirement. I had a sponsee that I talked to about this very issue because he had the same feelings. You're just constantly having to say I'm a newcomer. It's like no one's requiring you to say that. Announcing how many consecutive days you've been sober, anniversaries or birthdays or whatever, is not a requirement either. Yeah, my sponsor had talked about exactly what you brought up, overly looking at how many days you have versus the quality of your recovery. So working the steps and learning how to lead a better life. And yes, I had a slip yesterday, but look at where I was 5 years ago and acting out till 5 a.m. every day for weeks on end. I'm not that person anymore. I did have a slip, but yeah, not having to announce it at meetings, it's not a requirement. So,
but I feel like the way it's presented and when it's laid out, I make it feel like it's implied that you have to do it. That's the implication. It's like you're supposed to do it. And I'm not necessarily trying to get into SAA politics or anything. Like,
yeah.
But like, and I'm going to voice this because there might be other people that have these same resentments. And
I'm sure there are tons.
Like, I don't like the fact that we use how it works in the promises. That's an AA thing.
Mm-hmm.
We already thank AA and kind of kiss up to AA for making a recovery possible. I don't feel like we need to blatantly rip them off. And I have my issues with the AA program. I've seen some of their big books about how I think the implication is that all alcoholics are men. And I think that it's a very cis male gender white
it
dominated.
Written in the 1930s, which was a vastly different time than now. And there are a lot of reasons why I have issues with their stuff. I will say that when I started the program, the Green Book didn't exist. A lot of the SAA material was just trifold pamphlets and booklets. And borrowing a meeting format, a lot of meetings have stuck with the stuff that existed before. Some newer meetings are finding newer things to come up with. I forget. Yeah, there are a couple things that SAA meetings are starting to move away from, to differentiate their program stuff. One of the things that we'll be talking about on a future podcast is the 12 concepts of world service. And currently we're using AA's 12 concepts because the SAA version does not exist. And so trying to adapt 12-step philosophy into SAA program stuff is slow rolling, but each meeting can choose their own format and stuff. But I hear you there.
Right. So when I was really at the peak of my recovery, I decided I'm going to host 3 meetings a week because I'm an addict. I'm going to stretch myself to the absolute limit. Right. So in the beginning, I was doing everything and I was fine doing everything. I wanted to do everything. And then someone said hey, you should give roles to other people so they can feel like they're contributing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it worked for a month, and then people started for personal reasons or whatever saying they couldn't do it. And what also happened was the fact the responsibility was lifted off my shoulders. I stopped going to my own meetings because I'm going to act out tonight. I don't feel like going to my meeting, or I acted out earlier and I don't want to talk about it, so I'm just not going to go to my meeting. And so when I had to destroy my second laptop, I had a nice format. I had a structured format and how I wanted to run it. When I destroyed a laptop, the format was gone because I couldn't do it on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to makeshift the format I wasn't a big fan of. And so when I had to take back control of the meetings, I'm like, I'm going to revamp all this. So I did something that's different, and I haven't seen anyone do this yet. I did a PowerPoint,
mm-hmm.
and I worked really hard on it. And of course, then I found out the hard way that Chromebook is garbage, going back to what we said at the beginning for Zoom. So I actually ordered a used MacBook that should be coming, and hopefully I'll have better success with that. But one of the things I did, and I'm not trying to I don't want to say invent, because I took everything from the Green Book. That was my thing. I'm going to take stuff directly from the Green Book. And I have them called the 12 Truths of Sex Addicts Anonymous. It's just something I made up, just something. And I took stuff that was in there and made them into 12 little sections and whatever. It's, and just something different. It's something because I wanted something the equivalent of the promises without using the promises. You know what I'm saying? And I felt like I did that. And,
I think a couple other places are doing that as well. I can't remember if it was in the Outer Circle newsletter or it might have been in a workshop, but pulling promises straight out of the Green Book. And, here's a list of promises that are SAA promises.
Right, exactly. Yeah. We can be grateful to AA for laying the foundation, but we don't have to kiss their ass about it. You know what I'm saying? And I want to share this. It's kind of a funny story. So the first time I came to an SAA room was in 2013. So it's been a while ago. For my local meeting was on a Wednesday. And that particular year, Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve were on back-to-back Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And so the first meeting I ever went to, no one was there. I built my anxiety up and I got the guts to go, and nobody was there. And I was like, well, fuck. So, but then I'm like, okay. So then I got the courage to do it again the next week. And then, and that was okay. But like I said in my first step, I had this pattern of things got good. I had a crisis. I would reach out for help. Then things got better, right? Quote unquote, got better. And so I stopped going. Or conversely, I would relapse. And in my mental thoughts, like, well, I don't want to lie, but I don't want to be honest either. So I'm just not going to go, because that's just how the addict mind works, right? It's like, well, I'm just not going to go. I don't have to admit anything if I don't go. And so I did it a lot. Then I shared this in the first step. Like, things got really bad for me. And so then I said in 2016, I was going to go to the 2 meetings that were available at the time a week. And I was going to go to therapy twice a week. And I was, no matter how bad things got, no matter how bad my relapses were, I was going to keep going to it. And I've kept that mentality since then. And it's kept me sane. It stopped the bleeding, at least, right? I'm not where I want to be, but I'm not in the worst spot that I could be in, because I still kept going to meetings. I might have been a tourist in the meetings, but at least I was still going. And that was kind of the other thing too, is I'm sure in the Bay Area it's got a ton of meetings, right?
Yeah.
Okay. In Sioux City, Iowa, when I started the program, there were 2. And then I started the 3rd one. Me and one other person in the program was like, we're going to start a 3rd one. And then one of the other ones debunked because people stopped going to that one. So then we were back down to 2. And I have a real issue, a character flaw with people who are alcoholics and drug addicts. Because I'll give you an example. In Sioux City, Iowa, in the surrounding area, there are 88 AA meetings in a week. And NA, there are like 16 or 17 meetings in a week in the surrounding area. And only 2 SAA meetings in a week. And so for me, it's hard to have empathy for people who have an alcohol problem. But I'm like, you can go to a meeting 2 or 3 times a day, every day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But I only got 2 meetings. And then that's why Zoom was so good. Like, my sponsor told me, and also exactly what he told me. When I kept relapsing, he said, you need to get your fucking sobriety up. You need to do 90 meetings in 90 days. That means you need to go online and do them. And no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I was pissed. I was resentful. I'm like, who the heck are you to tell me what meetings I need to go to? Best thing that ever happened to me. I love these Zoom meetings. And I love, I've gotten to build so many great friendships. And I feel
that we normally wouldn't, have found each other, at least in the intimacy that we have. We might have seen each other at a convention or something like that, but not getting to see each other on a daily basis, even though we're in different parts of the country, different parts of the world. So yeah.
That's on my bucket list, by the way. I've never been to a convention. I want to go. One of these days, I will have the money and make the time to go. And then maybe one of these days we can actually meet up in person. That would be nice.
Yeah.
But sometimes things get in the way. But I want to switch. I want to kind of switch.
Yeah.
We got dark, and I want to kind of switch it to something that you are interested in.
Yeah. Music. So I wanted to kind of close out the conversation with this. Yeah. So
I love Judas. I'm a huge professional wrestling fan, right? I've been a professional wrestling fan since 1998. I was 9 years old, and I was doing the middle finger salute at 8-9 years old, whatever. Stone Cold Steve Austin, I got in trouble in elementary school for doing the DX chop, that was the fun stuff. But Chris Jericho, he started his band Fozzy, and it's funny because he had to work hard. His band was just kind of like first gigs for heavy metal. They did a lot of covers, and then they started making their own songs, and they had to work hard to gain the respect that they did. And Judas is the one. They actually just got a gold record out of that or whatever. I don't know how that works out of that. And the link I sent you, he's got 5.5 million views on that. And I love the song Judas. First off, it's a great wrestling entrance theme, badass, right? And number two, it's like I felt that song. Like you know, and I'm like, I'm going to beg Jason to put a clip of that at the end of the podcast so people can listen to it.
I definitely will.
And it's interesting. Hai Lung, thank you for those, like, at the Hour of the Wolf. I don't know how it's pronounced, but like
Ulvatime.
Yeah, so I love that. I love listening to that. I love Trost. I think that's how you pronounce it. Traust. Love that.
Yeah.
Love Nuropu. Love that one. And it's like, oh my God, these songs are so freaking great.
Yeah.
And one of the things that but maybe you may not. I want to kind of give you something to listen to. It's called the Mula Mantra. Are you familiar with it?
No.
Yeah, I heard it when I was doing yoga. There's two versions. There's a short version and a long version. It's just such a peaceful kind of like higher power type thing, and it's like, and I've always had weird taste in music. And it's interesting, the latest episode you pop up and you have your friend Bennett that was talking about heavy metal. I'm like, I was lost. I'm not gonna lie. I'm like, who in the heck are these people? Like, I mean, I've heard of Public Enemy, but I couldn't name a song. I know music is your higher power, and I respect that because I'm a hardcore atheist. So spirituality for me is hard. And you've turned me on to a bunch of different songs that I never would have listened to otherwise. And so even though a lot of heavy metal is definitely not my thing, you're not going to see me in a mosh pit ever. Like, that's not. I'm sorry. I know your friend Bennett says that you need to beat the toxic masculinity out of someone, but like, that's not. No, I'm not going to be moshing. No, I'm not going to get a concussion or whatever. It's a lifestyle. I mean, don't get me wrong. I would get into a wrestling ring and get a concussion that way.
It's kind of the same feeling that you get from something like that. So it's the physical aspect of it and the aggressiveness. And I was into wrestling a lot in the 80s and then kind of phased my way out of it, 80s and 90s. But it feeds that same purpose. So
okay, so I got a nerd out wrestling wise. Who was your favorite go-to wrestler in the 80s? Let me guess. Does it start with Hogan? That was everyone's favorite.
He was not my go-to, but definitely someone whose matches that I always loved watching. But either Macho Man Randy Savage or Rowdy Piper. I wear the kilt all the time, so I got to go with Rowdy Piper.
I'll tell you what. If your ass comes to Sioux City, Iowa, and you wear a kilt, you're going to get a lot of funny looks.
Oh, I get a lot of funny looks in California as well. So,
I love pro wrestling, and it's something that the addiction has taken away from me because I got so sapped into the addiction, into the pornography, into the sexual images that I can't sit through a wrestling show anymore. It's hard for me to sit through there. I have to watch clips or highlights. Like, I can't sit and watch a 2 or 3 hour show anymore. And I definitely blame that on the addiction because it's that instant gratification that I need to have. Like, I need to have this euphoria up here, and like wrestling can't ever reach that, and even though I enjoy what I see, I have to see it in small clips because I can't get into that zone like I used to. And you know what? There's definitely a correlation that the porn uses definitely have done that over the years.
Yeah, one thing I can say that detoxing off of porn for a while allowed me to take pleasure in mundane things that weren't enough for me. I always needed to get the bigger, better fix, and taking that out of the equation, I can sit there and relax, and then sit and enjoy something just small, slow building. With a lot of the music I listen to, it's just very, very fast paced, and it takes a lot for me to sit down and find something slow that I can sit with and enjoy. But detoxing off of the quick fix of short clips on YouTube, I've found a lot of really cool stuff on YouTube recently, and I see this video is going to be 20 to 30 minutes long. Shit! I want the short version of this so I can get on to the next one. And no, I am going to sit down and slow down and watch this and enjoy it. So trying to detox myself from the quick fix, whether it's pornography, whether it's short clips of things on TV, on YouTube, and things like that. So I can say being away from that for a while, it starts to come back. So you may be able to enjoy a 2 or 3 hour wrestling show in the future.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's definitely it was definitely a big part of my life. And my friends and I used to do performable wrestling shows in our backyard and in the basement on concrete floors. Like, we're lucky no one busted their head open and got a concussion, but you don't think about that stuff when you're a kid. And that brings me back to around like the first time I ever heard the word pornography. Now, okay, back up like further than that. When I was 7, 8 years old, I found my dad's porn stash in his drawer. And I'm like, why is someone's penis in someone's like vagina? Like as an 8-year-old, like that didn't compute to me. But then years later, I went to this comic book store that used to do, I don't know if you've ever heard like Magic the Gathering and things like that. Okay. So they were hosting tournaments and stuff there. Problem was there was kids mixing in with adults, which, in the early 2000s wasn't probably as big of a deal as it would be now. And there was an adult there that mentioned pornography. And I'm like, what the hell is pornography? So went home that night, typed it up in the search bar, and then I blacked out because I don't, and then I shared this. I think I shared this in the first step. The transition from adult pornography to child pornography in those from ages from 14 to 16 is a blur. I don't remember it. I blocked them. I couldn't tell you. And without naming specifics, I said file sharing sites. And you and I both know what those are. Yeah. And we don't need to name them because I hope they're long gone dead and they should be dead because they're nothing but a damn cesspool is what they were. And I think during that time period, is when I think child pornography really got rampant because it was so new in technology at that time. So the law hadn't caught up with it. Yeah. And one of the things that I've done for myself is that I have purposely made myself ignorant about the dark web. I don't know how to get onto it. I don't need that temptation. I much rather remain ignorant about that. And, I have a friend in the program who makes himself ignorant about internet in general. So he doesn't have that temptation at all. I'm like, well, you're 65 years old and your wife does all your stuff for you so that you can get away with that. I, as someone at 32, technology is only going to get more and more advanced. Like, I don't have that luxury, so it's like I have to learn to live with technology. Because I've had people tell me, like, you just need to get rid of your cell phone, you need to get rid of the internet, you need to do all this and that. I'm like, that's a short-term fix, but like, that's not going to solve the real problem. Yeah. And that's just cutting, baffling, powerful. It's what it comes down to, right? And, I want to end this because I got 20 minutes before my meeting starts, so we need to wrap this up. But yeah, I'm very grateful for this program because I was a piece of shit human being when I was 10 years ago. This program made me a better person. And even though I've had a lot of bumps and bruises and setbacks along the way, I wouldn't trade this program for anything. And I owe so much, and I love my local group. Don't get me wrong. They will always be my home group. But I feel more connected to the people through Zoom than I do with the people in my home group. Because I feel like being isolated in a small Iowa town gets glucky. And I think being in these Zoom meetings, for me personally, I get a broader sense of the SAA community. And I have so many brothers and sisters that I can talk to. And I owe my life to these Zoom meetings. And it's the best thing I ever did. Meeting you is one of the best things I've ever done. Doing this stuff on the podcast has been this stuff. And I'm getting emotional talking about it. But I'm so grateful. And I'm so hopeful that my best days are ahead. And that, do you remember the wrestler named Razor Ramon, Scott Hall? No, I don't. Okay, well, people who are pro wrestling fans will understand. He just died. Okay, and his thing was he was always the bad guy. And when he was inducted into the Hall of Fame, he said, "Bad times don't last, but bad guys do." Because he always called himself the bad guy. And I always I feel that, like, bad times won't last forever. And you take it a day at a time and never lose sight of why. For me, I can't lose sight of why I'm doing this, because I want to be a better person. And I can't be the best version of myself if I'm constantly acting out.
Yeah.
And there's so much I didn't get a chance to talk to, but save it for another podcast.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We can always do this again another 6 to 7 months.
Yeah.
We can talk more about more stuff. My goal is the next time I'm on this podcast, because there will be a next time. I have no doubt about it. There will be a next time. I want to be in a much better place next time than I am right now. And I'm confident that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
I believe in it's going to happen. And that's the one I want people, we got dark in this podcast, but, I'm optimistic. I'm more optimistic now than I've ever been. And for those that struggle, you're not alone. And that we're all here for you.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's a good way to end all that.
Perfect way to end this. I really appreciate you coming on to the podcast where we can actually have a conversation. When we did your first step, it was you just reading out your first step, and so there wasn't a lot of back and forth besides the bit at the end where we each got to share what it was like for us to witness your first step. But I love having a more interactive experience of having a conversation. So I'm super grateful that you approached me for coming back on, and I thought it was definitely perfect. And thank you so much for joining us on this one.
Oh yeah, no, the pleasure was all mine.
All right. Well, I will see you at a noon Zoom meeting really soon.
I hope so. My work schedule makes that difficult, but we're going to make it work.
Yeah.
We're going to make it work. All right. You have a good night, Jason.
All right. You too, Rye. See
Bye.
ya. Many thanks to Rye for coming back on the podcast to share more with us. I know it really takes a lot of courage to talk about this kind of stuff. In fact, in our meeting and fellowship today, we had someone mention that he is a minor attracted person and thought that it might get a negative reaction from the group, but instead there was just an outpouring of love and courage. So yeah, back to the conversation with Rye. At the end, we had some fun talking about wrestling and music, and I'll be sharing some of that here in a bit. We also talked about the previous episode with my friend Bennett. And when we were talking about the music of Heilung, I wanted to mention that their first live performance ever is available on YouTube, and that's called Lifa or Lifa for anyone who is interested. And the song that I mentioned, Ulva Time, is from a band called Sangleikir, which includes both Maria and Christopher from Heilung. We also talked about Bennett's comment about mosh pits, and I agree with Rye. It's not for everyone. I know I get a lot of aggression out in it, but I have a deep understanding of what the pit is. And I was looking for some fun clips on pit etiquette on YouTube. There's some fun ones out there, but I decided not to pull those clips. But I got sucked into watching an MTV documentary on the history of mosh pits from the 70s and 80s punk scenes to metal to the late 90s and pop culture. It was really great. A lot of different interviews with people and old clips and stuff like that. Really nostalgic. But yeah, talking about where it started in the underground and then going mainstream in commercials, and the debacle that was the Woodstock 99 concert, just the riots and stuff that ensued from just too many people into it that really don't understand the culture and the pit etiquette, etc. So I'm glad that it seems to have returned to the scene where it belongs. Rye mentioned that he gets that type of aggression out in wrestling, which brings me to Chris Jericho and his band Fozzy, and I'll be sharing that song here in a moment. And that's on the more hard rock metal side. And he also mentioned the Mula Mantra, which will be on the mellow side, and looking forward to playing that. I really connected with the lyrics of the Fozzy song called Judas, and I wanted to play a verse and chorus here.
Beautiful on the inside, you are innocence personified, and I will drag you down and sell you out. Run away. made of stone, and I will drag you down and sell you out. Embraced by the darkness, I'm losing the light. Encircled by demons I fight. What have I become now that I've betrayed everyone I've ever loved? I pushed them all away, and I have been a slave to the Judas in my mind. Is there something left for me to save in the wreckage of my life? My life. I become it. I become it. Judas in my mind. I become it.
Such a cool song, and I'll be definitely adding that to my recovery mix. Rai also mentioned the Mula Mantra, and I found several different versions of that on YouTube, and I wanted to play clips from 2 of them. Again, like he mentioned, there's a short version which is about 9 to 10 minutes, and there's also hour-long versions. But the first one is a more traditional piece, and this is by Kuranesh.
ॐ सच्चिदानन्द परब्रह्म पुरुषोत्तम परमात्मा श्री भगवती समेत श्री भगवते नमः। ॐ सच्चिदानन्द परब्रह्म पुरुषोत्तम परमात्मा श्री भगवती समेत श्री भगवते नमः। हरि ओम तत्सत्। 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 हरि ओम तत्सत्।
It's so relaxing. And the other one that I wanted to play is by, I think it's pronounced Neuroq, Neuroq, and I'll be leaving these in the show notes. So here's a bit of that one. Yeah, I love both of these, and there are several different versions out there on YouTube. So I wanted to look up what the Mula Mantra is, the translation. One of the videos I found, and I'll share a link to that as well, had the translation in the video itself. I'm not going to play the clip from that one, but I found this online. The Mula Mantra is an invocation for the presence of God by various qualities to nurture and sustain us towards our higher realization of self as oneness with Source. This mantra starts with the now very famous Sanskrit expression Sat Chit Ananda, which loosely means truth, consciousness, bliss. And I'm sure my pronunciation of that is far off, but yeah, I love both of these, and these will definitely be going into my spiritual mixes as well. And I'm so grateful for Rai for sharing these with us here on the podcast. Some of the music that I share with other people, I'm glad that people are being turned on to new music. Like Rye mentioned, discovering things that he never would have sought out on his own. And definitely for me, getting that back from Rye, both with the song Judas and the Mula Mantra here that I've shared on this episode. And if you wish to share any music or feedback for the podcast, you can reach us at feedback@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. Or if you wish to be a guest or reach me personally, you can always email me at jason@sexaddictsrecoverypod.com. That's all I have for this week, so thanks for tuning in, and as always, keep coming back. The views and opinions contained in the Sex Addicts Recovery Podcast are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the Bay Area Intergroup or the ISO of SAA.